Just for the record, that 5% of the vote that I did not get existed in my house. Led by my wife. It's good to be here, and thank you for the invitation to come. I am a reformed politician, but I am a acolyte and a disciple of city development and urban improvement. And I have always admired Jacksonville. And my trip today with Michael and talking to a number of you at the lunch left me really, really optimistic about what the future looks like for this city. When we were on the top of the tower at the River Club, and I was able to look out and see all of those city-owned assets and all of that undeveloped property that you have available to you. And I think about where Tampa was and how we started. We didn't have either 1/10 of the river in terms of size and 1/10 of the assets that you now are poised to redevelop. And so I'm excited to be here, and to the extent that I offend any of you, I don't care. You can't vote for me. Nor are you paying me. So it's... if what I say troubles you or offends some of you, have another drink. But I am excited to note that there have been at least a dozen people that have come up to me today and said to me, I lost my kids to Tampa, Florida. And as my daughter would say, sorry, not. But I tell you that only because I want you to hear my story. And I want you to understand the magnitude of the moment that you are facing. In 2011, or let me back up. In 1987, I served as the special assistant to the mayor at the time, the first woman mayor of Tampa, Sandy Friedman. And so I got my education at the feet of a strong mayor, first woman mayor, first Jewish mayor in Tampa. You can imagine some of the challenges in 1987 that she faced. I then went on to serve 2 terms on the Tampa City Council from 1995 to 2003. I ran for mayor in 2003 and lost, and went back in the private sector. But I spent the next 8 years studying cities around America that worked. And I studied mayors that were successful, and I studied cities that were not successful, and mayors that were unsuccessful in terms of their leadership style. And so in 2011, when I announced that I was going to run for mayor, virtually everybody said to me, Bob, you're a good guy, but you're not going to win, including my wife. The dog was with me. The dog was all in. They said, you don't stand a chance of winning this race. You're running against 4 other people that had never lost a race. You've lost a bunch of races. You are not going to win. Very similar to what Jacksonville finds itself now in the midst of a mayoral race. And I said to them, yeah, but you don't understand 2 things. You don't understand that, 1, my pain threshold is a lot higher than yours. I've lost before. And I know that losing doesn't kill you. Losing just makes you stronger. Losing just makes you tougher. Losing that makes you better. And the other thing that you don't understand about me, and bear in mind where Tampa was at this time, we were a donor city to places like Charlotte, North Carolina, and Austin, Texas, and Raleigh, Durham area, and God forbid, Nashville. We were a donor city of our best and brightest kids. We were a donor city of that intellectual capital, that talent. Our children and our grandchildren who were educated in Tampa, that were raised in Tampa, but they were leaving Tampa for somebody else and for somewhere else because that's where the opportunities were. We were a city that was struggling. We were a city where the sidewalks rolled up at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We were a city that really didn't have much of a future, and this wasn't that long ago. And I told those folks, not only is my pain threshold higher than yours, I am not going to lose my 2 daughters to Charlotte, North Carolina. It's very similar to the conversations I had with some of you today. I wasn't going to lose my kids. Now, they were only 8 and 10. They didn't have much of a choice. But they became, for me, a rallying point for what this mayor's race was all about, and what our city was all about, and what our city was facing, but more importantly, what our city could be. And I knew that we had to change Tampa's economic DNA if I was going to be able to keep my kids and thousands of other kids like my 2 daughters in my city. And so we set out on a course. I won that race. And on the day that I was elected, we set out on a path to change our community, to build off the assets that we had, and to transform that community into a destination for the best and the brightest in America. It wasn't easy, and it won't be easy for you. There will be naysayers. There will be critics. There will be people who will say, why are you bothering to develop your downtown? Why are we putting money into downtown when I need sewers in my neighborhood? Why are we studying downtown redevelopment again? What happened to all those other plans? You will hear that. But let me tell you, if you want to create an environment where you are not losing your kids to Tampa, Florida, if you want to be able to compete for the best and the brightest from around the globe, if you want to be a destination for corporate relocations, if you want to be a place where talent wants to come, no company is going to relocate to Jacksonville because you just built a Best Buy in the suburbs. It just doesn't work that way. Cities are the heart and soul of your community. The urban core is your front door. This is a place that is brimming with potential. Now the question is, what do you do? What do you do to become that place in America like Tampa has become, that the best and the brightest want to be? And I will tell you that talent attracts jobs. Talent attracts companies. The days of, like my father's generation, of people being wedded to a city because that's where the steel mill was, or that's where the paper plant was, and their value was found in their backs and in their arms, not in their heads. Today's generation and some of the young people that I've met here today, they can live anywhere in the world that they want to live. They are mobile. So the choice for Jacksonville, as it was for Tampa, is, are we going to create a place, which we were not, that we can compete for that talent, where my kids are not going to go to Charlotte, North Carolina, but they're going to want to come to Tampa, Florida. That's the journey that you are on, Jacksonville. And the choices that you make, certainly in the next election, but certainly, and more specifically, over the next couple years, as you prepare for what I think will be the renaissance of this city.
This is Tampa, 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 Tampa. Dudi Tampa. Namaste, America.
All right. I got to explain that. That was me. In front of 30,000 of our Indian friends and neighbors from all over the world who came to Tampa to celebrate, for the first time it was held in the United States, the International Indian Film Association Awards Dinner. It's like the Bollywood Oscars. And for those of you, I look good up there in that. Yeah. So me and 30,000 of my friends, new friends, filled half of Raymond James Stadium. Tom Brady wasn't there. Half of Raymond James Stadium to celebrate this event. And it was the first time it was ever held in the United States. And it was an amazing experience. And so that's what Tampa has become, is a destination for those types of events. Now, we didn't always look like that. We looked more like this. This is what Tampa began as, like Jacksonville, a port city, heavily industrialized. Our waterfront looked like a bunch of broken down docks. There were rats as big as cats there. It was a city, like Jacksonville, that was blue collar, of working people, and the waterfront was totally underutilized and significantly underappreciated. You see the bridges crossing the Hillsborough River there. I want you to look at the one in the top right there. That is what has become Harbor Island. That was a phosphate dumping pit. We had a huge phosphate industry in the port area, and the port is immediately adjoining downtown. That was a vacant phosphate dumping pit. There was a bridge trestle that ran across from downtown proper. There was nothing on this island but weeds 6 feet tall and rats. People, Tampanians, used to go out there and shoot the rats for sport. Totally underutilized. Basically, that's what our downtown looked like until the early to mid 1980s. I took office in 2011 in the midst of the worst recession since the Great Depression. Tampa was bleeding jobs. We had some 4,000 homes in some state of mortgage foreclosure. We had a local tax roll that had, property taxes had diminished from $160 million down to $119 million. Because of Save Our Homes, the ability for us to claw back over time literally took the 8 years that I was in office. My property tax budget when I left office in 2019 finally got back to 2011 numbers. So everything that you see tonight, we did without a lot of money because we were still in the depths of that recession. Companies were closing up, people were leaving, people were fleeing. That's a heck of a way to come into office in 2011. But I knew that that was going to give me an opportunity to do things that I couldn't do because of the extreme circumstances that we were facing. And that people were desperate for change, and they were desperate for hope, and they were desperate for somebody to do something to make it better. Not exactly a great time to launch an ambitious plan about what the future of Tampa looked like. But it enabled me to get things done that I probably wouldn't have been able to do without a lot of drama in a normal year. And so we pushed a lot of changes, whether it was to the permitting process, whether it was to the creation of the Envision Plan, which is the development plan that will guide downtown Tampa for the next 20 years. I figured I wasn't elected to manage the decline. My job was to recreate what we could be and to change that DNA and to give people hope and to ask people to believe in something bigger than just themselves at times when it was darkest in their life. And I told them that if we pulled together and if we worked together and we struggled together and we helped each other, that at the end of this, we would get through this to a better place. And I told them that I know it's always darkest before the dawn, but dawn does come. And in that dawn, we're going to see a newer, a better Tampa. But you got to stick with me. You got to believe in the capacity of this city to be a great city. It may not look like a great city now. That river, and you know there's a river there, may not be what you thought it would be. But if we execute on this plan and we do it together and we don't worry about who's a Democrat and who's a Republican and we worry about who's a Tampanian and who's willing to put their shoulder to the wheel to help all of us collectively build what we know we are capable of building. It began there, in the darkest of times. We set out on this journey together. Black and white, Hispanic, gay and straight. We joined hands. We picked each other up. We wiped the blood off our face. We spit out those teeth that we really didn't need. And we made a fundamental choice. Were we going to get up off the mat and get back in the game? Were we going to get up and get back in the game? And Tampa got back in the game. So we created the Envision Plan. Now, If you think this is going to happen quickly, it's not. I hope your vision is executed quicker than ours was, because the Tampa Riverwalk was 6 mayors and 40 years in the making. Mayor Billy Poe in 1974 started out selling wooden planks like I think Mayor Godbolt did, selling wooden planks that families could put their names on, and that was the beginning of the Tampa Riverwalk. It was nothing more than a glorified fishing dock. I still have people ask me, families, do you still have those planks? I'm like, no, the termites ate those planks. But that's how it started. And each mayor did a small portion of it. Now, not every mayor had the same commitment to it. You know, and mayoral administrations ebb and flow, and priorities ebb and flow, and candidates ebb and flow. And so the city tends to move in fits and starts. We did some of the same things. Each mayor did a small portion of it, but for most it wasn't the all-consuming desire that it was for me, because I knew this is our differentiator. Cities that have water have a competitive advantage if they do it correctly, and if they take advantage of that competitive advantage and that waterfront. Just think about the hundreds or thousands of cities that don't have a river running right through it. Think about how they wish they did have a river. And think about what an asset that river can be for you as you move forward. Fortunately, for the mayors that followed me, each of them invested public money in critical facilities, public venues. None of them were connected. All of them were on the water. Some of them were built in areas that you would never have imagined that they would be successful. But each of them contributed in their own way to creating what I call sort of the jewels of the necklace that are now connected together. And so now you can walk from the History Museum right here or the Florida Aquarium right there and walk all the way around those 2.5 miles, touching each of these things. We have the cruise ship terminal. We have the Amalie Arena, which I'll talk about later, which is where the Stanley Cup Tampa Bay Lightning play. The Tampa Children's Museum, Tampa Museum of Art, the Straz Performing Arts Center, which is the largest performing arts center in the southeast United States, south of Atlanta, and also the Convention Center. None of them were connected. That's what the Riverwalk does. It provides that linkage for all the investments that your city has already made in the public arena. Now, well, in 2012, I was able to, after a lot of lobbying, and we had been turned down twice, convince the Obama administration to give us a Tiger Grant. And a Tiger Grant is generally used for cities to do roads and bridges and tunnels and things like that. We were able to convince them of the value of the Riverwalk as a pedestrian thoroughfare, taking people off of congested streets, opening it up to bikes and other vehicles. And so they gave us $11 million, which I married to another $4 million of city money, and we were able to finish the largest and last pieces of the Riverwalk that finally connected it. When we started it, that's what, oops, sorry. How do I go back? There we go. All right. Nope. See, when I was a mayor, I had a whole staff to do this for me. Okay. That's what the Riverwalk used to look like in the river. That's, we have a lot of crew teams that come down in the wintertime from up north and train on the Hillsborough River, and that's all of their crew art. I'm generous when I use the word art. That's what our riverfront used to look like. And when we started out on this river, parts of it we had to build extending out over the water. Parts of it, like right here, and parts of it we were able to put on the land side. But again, it goes to show you the value of bipartisanship. I mean, we worked really, really hard with the Obama administration to make this happen. When that Riverwalk was named as one of the people's choices in America, I literally called up the former Secretary of Transportation, Ray LaHood. He was no longer the secretary, and I said, Mr. Secretary, I just want you to know that your investment in our community has proven to be one of the best investments that you could have made, and as a result of that, Now, that Tampa Riverwalk is one of the highlights in the award category. But it highlights problem solving over ideology and progress over partisanship. You know, when you're in the mayoring business, you don't have time to worry about who's a Democrat or who's a Republican. That's not your job. Let the other fools fight about that. Your job is to build a city. And there's no Democratic or Republican way to build a city. When I was the mayor, I'm a Democrat, but I had a great working relationship with Governor Rick Scott because I knew he could help my city. And so it's important that whoever your next mayor is, establish those relationships and continue to maintain them, and let's put partisanship aside. So when we finished the Riverwalk, what we saw happen was private sector interest, private sector investment. And I knew if I built it, they would come. And so we had a number of parcels of land on the waterfront, very similar to what you have, that were fallow, that were abandoned, that hadn't been used in decades because nobody came to downtown Tampa and no one came to the waterfront. At this period of time, before I took office, there were probably 600 people that lived in downtown Tampa. 400 of them lived in the Morgan Street jail. We were not a destination for residential development, unless you were there courtesy of the Tampa Police Department. That's how bleak our circumstances looked in the 80s and early 90s and up until probably the early 2000s. But once we made that investment in our waterfront, what you saw was significant amount of private capital being deployed because they wanted proximity to the waterfront. They wanted access to the water. They knew their buildings would be significantly of greater value by proximity to the waterfront. They knew that those young workers who wanted to live, work, and play in the downtown core wanted to be in close proximity to the water. The water will become the magnet for everything that you do. And hopefully, eventually, when I come back in 10 years, it will be the center of your urban experience, not the northern or southern edge. So what we saw, and over here on this side, is the before, and then this is the after. This was an abandoned piece of property that the city owned on the Hillsborough River. It had right here, let's see, yeah, here, located right there was an existing natural spring that used to be the primary supplier of water to the city of Tampa back in the 1940s and 1950s. This was an abandoned water building that was dilapidated, the roof was falling in, that used to be the water treatment facility that serviced the water from the spring in that facility. Long since been abandoned. So we went out and designed this park right here, dug out that spring, so the water is now flowing freely into the Hillsborough River. We made this a park, and I can't say this enough. Downtown's got to be open to everybody. If you want the naysayers who wonder why you're investing in your downtown, if you want people to take ownership of Jacksonville and your urban core, you've got to make it a place that welcomes everybody and that everybody feels comfortable. Whether you live in public housing or whether you live in million-dollar mansions, it is the common ground for your city. It is the gathering point. It is the place where everybody is equal. It is the place that doesn't charge. It's the place that these kids can come and play in the splash pad. It's the place where kids in the middle of a hot summer who live in public housing projects across the river who don't have air conditioning in their house, their moms can bring them there. They can play, they can cool off, and it becomes their front lawn as well. It is so important that as you build, you consider that you are a diverse community and that everybody needs to be welcome in your parks, in your downtown, and that you celebrate the inherent goodness of everybody. Cities that don't are never going to be those places that those young people want to come. If you don't celebrate the inherent dignity of everybody, and I don't care who you love, what God you worship, where you came from, the language that you speak, in my city, everybody is welcome. Everybody is welcome. So we dug the spring out, and this building right here was known as the Waterworks building. So I put out a request for proposal, because it was a city-owned building, asking restaurants because I wanted to activate the waterfront. I knew that it couldn't just be the Riverwalk. It had to be things that would draw people into downtown Tampa, and there's nothing better than restaurants. So I put out an RFP. Responding to the RFP was the Gonsmart family, who owns the Columbia restaurants, who some of you are familiar with, and if you've been to Tampa, you know them for sure. That family has been in business with the Columbia restaurants since 1905. It is the longest serving family-owned business in the state of Florida. And Richard Gonsmart came in and put a proposal in for the Waterworks building, which is right here, and won the proposal, and invested $6 million, and it wasn't a Columbia restaurant, it was farm to table. $6 million in that building when everyone told him, don't do it, you're crazy, no one's going to come down here. It's not a place, you're way ahead of your time, including, and I told this story at lunch, including some of the founders of another famous Tampa chain who know a little bit something about the restaurant business, and that's the Outback guys. They told Richard, you're crazy, don't do it, don't spend any money there. It's not going to work. Richard made his $6 million back in the first year. But you see how we opened it up to the waterfront with a little bit of something for everybody. This is the continuation of the Riverwalk running around Waterworks Park. Again, this city built this. We put this band shell up here, a lot of splash pads for the kids, the bridge over the lagoons that were carved out. You see the lagoons right there. The day we opened this park, there was a mother manatee and a cub in that lagoon. Not a cub, but whatever they call them. Contrary to popular opinion, that did not end up on the menu at Eulalie. But the restoration of that spring, the building of that park, and the repurposing of that old building puts properties back on the tax roll. And so the ad valorem property tax that Richard now pays on that, plus the sales tax and all the alcohol tax, is going to more than compensate the city for our investment over here. So this is what the old building looked like. This is the old Waterworks building. There's the spring as we were building it. There's the spring as we were digging it out. This is what it looked like when it was a functioning spring providing water to the city of Tampa. Those are not my daughters. And you can see what it became. This is some of you have been to the Eulalie restaurant. This is the restaurant, open space, activation of the outdoors, creating literally a massive patio and a front lawn. That is the spring and the lagoon that leads out into the Hillsborough River. There is what it looks like at sunset. He's killing it, absolutely killing it, and provides another anchor along the Hillsborough River that helps to activate it, energize it. We put boat slips out there for people to pull up on their boats. There's a river taxi that now runs through a couple of these destinations, dropping off people 18 hours a day. And as you move further up the Hillsborough River, this is what was known as the Tampa Armature Building. Right there. That was where the trolleys in Tampa, Florida, when Tampa had historic trolleys years ago, we've brought them back. That's where they used to be repaired, right there, in these big bays. That building was a functioning machine shop. and the land was basically fallow all the way around it. I mean, this is what it looked like when they first started the construction. This is right next to, Eulalie's right here. The Riverwalk continues all the way up and over here to this bridge. This is the armature piece of property. I did, when it looked like this, if you can imagine this, I did one of my State of the Cities there. I mean, we had to get the water off the floor so people didn't get electrocuted by all the power lines and the lighting. But I did it there because I wanted to tell the story. And storytelling is important for mayors because you've got to lay out what that vision is. You've got to let people see what's going to happen at the end of this. You've got to tell them about the journey. You've got to lay out for them exactly what the expectations are, but folks, at the end of the day, this is what we're going to do together. So I did my State of the City in right there with the backdrop of the downtown over my shoulder. The stage was there. The people were back this way. And I asked them to believe, to see for themselves, to just close their eyes and not see what we've always known, but see what could be. I mean, I literally made them all shut their eyes. There must have been 1,000 of them there. I said, I want you to go on this journey with me. I want you to shut your eyes and I want you to imagine what our community is going to be and what this building could be and what that river could be. And 6 years later, they're doing yoga out there. That's what it looks like now. This thing is completely repurposed. It's a massive food hall. You see the residential that has been built behind it. There will be hotels over here, more retail. The Riverwalk has been extended all the way down here to the next bridge. That's what it looks like pretty much 18 hours a day. And there's all kinds of food vendors and restaurants in there. A lot of outdoor activities. You see the skyline in the background. It's one of the nicest pieces in Tampa, Florida, and it's still yet to realize its entire potential. But again, it was the investment in the Riverwalk that triggered their desire to put private capital to bear, which will now pay property taxes heading into the next couple years. This is what happens when you believe. That's when I called the Secretary of Transportation. Part of the success of the Riverwalk is not only connecting the jewels, if you will, but making sure that they're activated. This is what's called Curtis Hickson Park. Immediately adjoining, and my predecessor, Mayor Iorio, did this one. This is the Children's Museum here, and the Tampa Museum of Art, which is just in the midst of a $100 million expansion, is right here, again, fronting on the Hillsborough River. That view from right there, looking back here at night, is spectacular, especially when the bridges are all lit up. Right across the river from this is the University of Tampa with those signature minarets. For those of you that have been to downtown Tampa, that is our Instagram pictures, you know, since I'm a hipster and I have teenage kids. That's where people take a lot of those Instagram photos and put them in. So those minarets are pretty spectacular and famous Tampa icons. But, and the same scenario exists right here. I wasn't happy just doing the riverbank on the east side of the river. I knew that if I was going to make Tampa, and I make the center of Tampa that river, that I had to look to the west bank as well, across the river. Very similar to what you have on the south bank, I guess it is, where we were today, Michael. And I knew that if it was going to be the center, we also had to focus on both sides of the river. And so we started looking at city-owned assets. And one of them was a 25-acre, vastly underutilized park. It was dark, it was dangerous. There had not been investment in that park in probably 20 years. It abuts a predominantly African-American neighborhood and a historic West Tampa, which was home to many of the cigar workers that came to Tampa in the early beginnings of Tampa. So I was able to, thanks to good lawyering, win a $27 million judgment in the BP settlement because of the impact of the BP spill on Tampa. So I took $20 million of that settlement and put it to this park. It was a $35 million park, so I took the $20 million of that plus $15 million of city money and completely redid Julian B. Lane Waterfront Park. And what was a very dangerous, drug-infested, underutilized piece of property became the highlight of the West Bank. This is when we opened it, and there was a band. Some of you younger people will know them, Third Eye Blind. I called them the Three Blind Pigs for like the first 3 weeks when my staff told me who was coming to play, because I had no idea who they were, and my younger staff would just roll their eyes, and they're like, Mayor, come on, it's Third Eye Blind or whatever. So we opened this park to 20,000 people out there. They were playing. It was a great experience. Again, taking advantage of the waterfront, we put the Tampa River Center on the waterfront to accommodate on the lower level all of the crew teams that row on the Hillsborough River. Again, activating your waterfront. Up above is a community area that literally is booked every weekend for years to come for weddings. Because that view, looking back at downtown, is probably the best view of the skyline in our city. Again, activating for everybody. You heard me say the neighborhood that we built this in was a lower socioeconomic neighborhood. They had not been given the attention that they needed and deserved after all these years. This was the largest investment that had ever been made in that community, and it became the gathering point, again, black, white, Hispanic, young, old, gay, straight, for everybody. 25 acres of open space, activities for the kids, pickleball courts, and let me tell you, anybody who's building parks now that doesn't include pickleball courts, you're going to hear about it. Build pickleball courts. I even started playing pickleball. Lots of open space, taking advantage of the natural shoreline, building it so it's resilient. Like you, we have challenges with surge. There's my daughter and I looking out over that huge crowd. But it became a gathering place for everybody. It activated the neighborhood. And I can tell you in no uncertain terms, there have been hundreds of millions of dollars of private capital invested in that neighborhood, going from the Hillsborough River a half a mile west as they redevelop properties, repurpose properties, private capital, and buildings that are now on the tax rolls paying a whole lot more than what they were before. So investments in places like this, in places like you have, and it's not an either-or situation. It's not parks versus development. You can do both in the same. You can do both and be successful and have one complement the other, one help to activate the other, one energize the other, one become the place where restaurants and museums and bars are on the ground floors of these restaurants that spill out into these open areas where people can take their drinks. We set up a system where you can get a wristband and you can get a drink at any number of the restaurants along the Riverwalk and then go walk the Riverwalk with that wristband, with your cocktail. That's what happens when you elect an Irish guy mayor. This is, you got to turn this volume up on this one.
Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park, Tampa, Florida. The redevelopment of Julian B. Lane Riverfront Park transformed a park that was unsafe and uninviting into a vibrant, engaging, and sustainable public space. This riverfront park was part of a broader effort to reorient downtown Tampa around the Hillsborough River and revitalize West Tampa. The West Tampa plan, which identified this park for investment, resulted from Mayor Bob Buckhorn's participation in the ULI Daniel Rose Fellowship Program. The park resulted from the largest public outreach effort ever by the Tampa Parks and Recreation Department and brought together 4 community-driven priorities. areas for family and community gatherings, first-class active recreation facilities, access to the Hillsborough River from a river promenade just 3 feet above the water's surface, a boathouse, and a floating pedestrian dock, and recognition of the history of the site and community through historical markers and works from 3 artists. The park design included moving the seawall back into the park to bring the river closer to the people, which also created a calm cove for kayak and paddleboard renters. The design includes 2 living shoreline elements along the seawall, providing habitat for marsh vegetation and marine animals.
But you notice, oh, thanks. You know, I even included the sisters in there. I don't know if you saw them or not, but the nuns were there. I needed all the help I could get. 3 blocks away from Julian B. Lane Park was a dilapidated, dangerous public housing project. It was one of the oldest in Tampa, basic 1940s barrack style. It was, the name at the time was North Boulevard Homes. There was one Sunday that I was there that a little girl had been shot by 2 knuckleheads deciding to settle their argument shooting guns and hit this little girl 100 yards down the road. This was a place where the children who lived in North Boulevard Homes had little hope and less of a future. Drug-infested, gang-infested, violent, gun-riddled place that these families did not deserve to live in. And even though I didn't run the public housing system, I decided that we were going to change that. That little girl and little girls like her moving forward were going to have a place that they were proud to call home, and a place where they actually had a future, and a place where there were mentors, and a place where they didn't have to worry about being shot from a gunfight 100 yards down the road and the bullet hitting her. I wasn't going to tolerate that. And so we decided to change the paradigm. We took this, 620 homes, looking like this, no different than probably public housing here in Jacksonville, dilapidated, old, unair-conditioned housing, and turned it into this. We turned it into 1,800 units of affordable housing. 70% of it was affordable, 30% of it was market rate. At build-out, what was this is now this, and this, and this, will result in a $500 million investment into the West Tampa neighborhood. But more importantly, give hope to folks who, but for their circumstances, had no hope. And give them an opportunity to live in good, decent housing. It may be subsidized housing, but they deserve the same opportunity for the same life that my 2 kids do on Davis Islands. There used to be a water facility here on this 18-acre parcel. And it's immediately adjoining the Hillsborough River. It was one of our water plants. And so I said, no. We're going to demo that. I'm going to move you. And then I'm going to take these 18 acres and we're going to put it out on the open market for private developers to come in and bid on this and to give me their best ideas. There will be on this site, the current mayor, Mayor Castor, continued that plan. There will be on this site $300 million investment, 600 units of mixed use, 40% of the project. $75 million will go to women and minority-owned businesses on this project to give the people in the neighborhood an opportunity to share in that prosperity. This is sort of the fact sheet on that particular project. We've got a Publix coming in there because it's basically a food desert. And this is 4 blocks off of the Hillsborough River. I mean, you talk about an underutilized piece of property. In an underserved community, this would be a classic example. That's not the case now. Okay. Here comes Water Street. Ten years ago, a fellow named Jeff Vinnick bought the Tampa Bay Lightning. He was basically a stock market whiz kid who had run Magellan's funds for years at a very young age, made a lot of money. This is going to sound familiar to you. Made a lot of money at a young age. At 50, he pretty much decided to retire and decided he wanted to buy a sports team. He had no idea how to buy a sports team, so he bought a book. It's a true story. Bought a book and read the books and learned how to buy a sports team. And he looked at a number of different franchises and ended up on Tampa for a number of different reasons. But he bought the Tampa Bay Lightning, which was in dismal shape at the time. Losing franchise, losing fans, losing everything. So Jeff bought the Lightning, moved his family to Tampa, moved his businesses to Tampa, and started the process of rebuilding the Lightning and the customer experience. Along the way, I had just gotten elected. And after listening to me for 2 years preach the gospel of Tampa and lay out the vision, and the Amalie Arena is virtually on the water. And so he noticed, and bear in mind this was in the midst of that recession that we just lived through. There were a number of large surface parking lots around the entrance to the Amalie Arena. And Jeff, being a shrewd investor, realized that they were undervalued. And he bought a number of them using LLCs to kind of hide his activity, but bought a vast number of them around the entrance to the Amalie Arena, which is where the Lightning play. And so he accumulated over time a significant number. And then Jeff, who is not a developer, had no desire to be a real estate developer, he's become a developer, went out and hired some of the best talent in America to help him create this plan that sort of married the vision that I had been preaching for so long. about the activation of the waterfront and creating this place where young people wanted to be and how we were going to be more competitive. And so he created, along with a guy who you may have heard of, Bill Gates. We pitched Bill Gates' investment fund, Cascade, on being a partner in this deal. And I don't know that Bill Gates even knows that he owns 70% of this, but he does. But that fund became Jeff's partner. And so the resources that were there for us to be able to do a lot of really exciting things. He went out and hired some of the best architects and the best land use planners, created the first well district. Now, there are well buildings. These are buildings that are designed to encourage healthy living and through all kinds of things like air filtration and the types of trees you plant. He created the first well district ever in this Water Street development. Over the last 5 years, all through COVID, all through all of what we've just gone through, he has been building. Much of what you just saw there is only recently opening up. We then took the USF Medical School, University of South Florida's medical school, and moved it from the main campus into the Water Street development. So USF, again with the help of the state of Florida and Governor Scott at the time and Speaker Will Weatherford, created a medical school in downtown Tampa. So we were building a medical educational cluster that will help drive the economy moving forward. I was famously quoted as saying, much to the chagrin of the Tampa Bay Rays, who would like to be on the Tampa side, I said that the relocation of that medical school is more important than the Tampa Bay Rays coming here. Because we're talking about creating real jobs and real opportunities, attracting world-class researchers, world-class faculty. Those medical students tend to stay within 60 miles of where they do their residency, so we are now building an entire intellectual cadre of bright young people. There will be companies who will want to relocate around that medical school to take advantage of the research that takes place there. Tampa General Hospital is right across the river, and so that's the main teaching hospital for the USF Med School, and so the connections are great. That cluster, that medical educational cluster in your urban core is significant. It's a game changer for a city. If you have universities here, get them to invest in your downtown core, get them to build in your downtown core, and I guarantee you it will change the dynamics. This is what Water Street looks like now. You see over here, I mean, this is the vacant, these are all the properties that he bought. All of this, all of this, all of this. You see what used to be surface parking lots there. That's sort of the master plan. That's what our city looked like 2 years ago. There were more tower cranes than I had ever seen in downtown Tampa. I think there were 15 tower cranes on this site alone because unlike most developers who are playing with other people's money, you know, Vinnick and Gates, they got the money. They're not worried about the market cycles. They can build for the long term and build the quality because they know that they can withstand the ups and downs of a traditional office development market. Paid for world-class design, as you see in these. We wanted to make sure that this was a signature project, and it wasn't a cookie-cutter office building. It was world-class design that people would be proud of. Big food court, outside food court on the water at Sparkman's Wharf. They opened the first four-star hotel in Tampa, the JW Marriott, and then this week they opened the Edition, which is the first five-star hotel in downtown Tampa, designed by Ian Schrager. This will show you how the landscape has changed with the animation. That's what it used to look like. Not now. That's what it looks like now. million square feet of office space, a million square feet of retail and cultural, 3,500 residents for rental or for sale, 629 new hotel rooms, 727 renovated hotel rooms, Tampa's first five-star hotel. That's what Water Street looks like right now. That's what a vision and the resources to get it done can do for your city as well. You heard me talk about Harbor Island, that abandoned phosphate dumping ground. Now, 1,000 condos, 500 single-family homes, 1,200 apartments, 1 hotel, and a lot of retail. So, as you build, activate. As you build, celebrate the amazing diversity of your community. As you build, include a lot of public art and a lot of public amenities. As you build, celebrate the little things, the little surprises in that urban environment that you come across that you say, wow, I wasn't expecting that, or I'd never thought that was going to be here, or let me look at and try to figure out what this is. This is in Julian B. Lane Park. I took a parking garage. These guys used to be graffiti artists. I hated them. We gave them a job to do, and we painted an entire city parking garage with public art that they, now that they're a little older, they're a little more responsible. But that parking garage coming into downtown Tampa is now decorated with this. You know, I don't have to understand what it is. I don't have to like it. Probably if you asked me, I'd say, I don't like it, but that's the purpose of art. I don't have to like it. If I'm talking about it, it's successful. Getting back to making your Riverwalk and your riverfront something for everybody, we set up a committee that honored the pioneers of Tampa that helped make our city what it is today. You have to be dead, so I'm not going to be on there. You have to be dead for 15 years, so I'm not planning on being there for a while. But we honored going back to the Seminole Indian tribe, and we set up a committee of historians, so you keep the politics out, so you don't put your brother on there or your uncle, of historic people in Tampa's development. And there are many, many contributions going back to the days when Tampa was just a U.S. fort, and the Seminole Indians were still largely in control. So celebrating the contributions of all of our citizens is really, really important. The other key, activate the hell out of it. I created more events than you can possibly imagine. And the reason I did it was because I knew if I could create events that would bring people downtown who had not been there before or had given up on downtown and they saw what had happened, they would look around and they would inevitably say, dang, look at this. Look what happened downtown. I've never knew this was here. I used to go out and walk the Riverwalk. I'd put sunglasses and a hat on, and I would eavesdrop on people. Hoping they didn't know who I was. And inevitably what you would hear, particularly from longtime Tampanians who had never come downtown because they had written off, you would hear them say, wow, what the hell happened here? When did all of this occur? This is really cool. I want to take my family here when they come and visit me. So we activate everything. You elect an Irish guy mayor, he turns the river green. That river, you would have a little trouble. Your river's a little bit bigger. That event, that St. Patrick's Day event, has become one of the top destinations on St. Patrick's Day in the country. I mean, we turn that river green and people just have a blast. Everybody's Irish that day. Those are the minarets across the river, those signature parts of the University of Tampa. Obviously, everybody knows Gasparilla. Most of you probably will deny ever showing up there. But it is like Mardi Gras in Tampa. It is a big deal for Tampa when we all dress up as pirates and do things that our wives normally don't let us do. That is, I think, the third or fourth largest parade in the country. There will be 400,000 people on Bayshore Boulevard in advance of the invasion of the pirates, the mystic crew of Gasparilla, and it's a big Tampa thing. So if you haven't been down there, get your hall pass, come on down. I can't get you out of jail anymore, but have a big time. You know, Balloon Fest. We lit up all the bridges, as you guys did as well. Just activate the dickens out of it. We would do mac and cheese throwdowns. We would do barbecue fest. We would do Indian fest. We would do Asian Pacific fest. We would do African American music festivals. Whatever it took to get people downtown and to take ownership of our parks, we did. You got to drive the narrative. You got to embody those hopes and aspirations as the mayor. Because it's your enthusiasm and your ability to tell that story that other people will start to believe and start to incorporate into their lives and their economic DNA. Sometimes you have to do stupid stuff. Now, we're still on the stupid stuff. I would not suggest that. That's me. That's a skateboarder jumping over me. We had just opened up a new skate park, and they're like, Mayor, let him do an ollie over you. And I looked at my staff, I'm like, what's an ollie? And they said, oh, you just lay down, and the skateboarder's going to jump over you. And I'm like, is it going to hurt? Will I have any ribs left in case he misses? Fortunately, he did not miss. I survived. I lived to talk about it. But it's about being all in and being a believer in your community. If you want my help, me and the boys are happy to come. That's me on the 50 cal. One of my highlights of my days as the mayor. Contrary to popular belief, I didn't point it at the media. Although some of them thought I did. I didn't, and I was shooting blanks. So it was all good. But what happens at the end of this process, although cities never really reach an end, can be magical. What happens when a city comes together and pulls together and believes in each other and believes in the narrative and starts to incorporate it into their DNA. When your next mayor, in every speech that he or she gives, talks about where we're going and how we're going to get there and how everybody needs to pull at that rope and how everybody needs to believe that in spite of the ups and the downs and the ebbs and the flows and the trials and the tribulations of what you've gone through, that together we're going to get there. When that happens, it's magical. That's when you transform a city. That's when you realize the hopes and the aspirations that all of you hold for Jacksonville. And in the case of Tampa, in the case of Tampa, the waterfront becomes the focal point for everything you do. Those were our two world champion Tampa Bay Lightning and Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We don't do ticker tape parades. We do boat parades. And now what you see, when that magic happens, the Lombardi Trophy flies, fueled by a little avocado tequila from a guy who doesn't even eat bread. I didn't put the part in there of his backup quarterback kind of helping him through the crowd. But that's when a community rallies and comes together. Now I'm going to leave you with this. I've seen it. I've seen it work. I know the trials and tribulations that you go through. I know the challenges that your next mayor is going to face. I know the voices out there that are clamoring for something different, that say that we've done enough planning, that enough false starts. Why do we pay attention to downtown Tampa? Well, that too. Why would you invest in downtown Jacksonville community, council members, mayor? Because it matters. If you're going to compete for that intellectual capital that you were losing to Tampa, that I was losing to Charlotte, North Carolina, you got to build a place with a heart. And you got to build a city with an identity. And you got to create a place that people want to be, where you can celebrate that amazing diversity of this community, where you can bring young talent together, where they will choose to live and companies will choose to come because they have chosen to live, work, and play in your community. Your downtown is your front door. It is your heart and soul, and that river is the best asset that you have. So let those voices have their moment. But I can tell you at the end of the day that this is going to be your decade. This is going to be your moment, Jacksonville, when you rise to the occasion, when you put aside those past differences, when you stop worrying about who's doing what to whom, when you stop caring about who's a Democrat or who's a Republican, and you focus on what it means to be a citizen of this community and what it's going to take to make this the place that your kids want to stay. This is your moment. This is the time when you decide your tomorrow needs to start today. This is a great opportunity for you as you turn the page, if you will. The assets that you have are unbelievable. I wished I had them. The consensus is coming together. The leadership is ready for a change. That happens in cities. That's a good thing. But over the next 3, 4, 5 years, particularly with a new mayor coming and that new energy coming, you need to help he or she be successful. You need to coalesce behind that person. And you need to drive this vision of what a better Jacksonville can be. I wasn't going to lose my kids. That's why in 2011, when they said I couldn't win, I set out on this journey. Understand the magnitude of this moment. This is your time. This is your window. This is when your amazing history and hope meet. Jacksonville, you've had great leaders, elected and unelected, that have given you your roots. It's time to give yourself your wings. Let's get it done, Jacksonville. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
You bet, Michael.
Let's hear it for Bob Buckhorn.
Thank you.
Well, I pity the speaker we have next year. Would you want to follow up behind this man?
Thank you.
So we have some choices. We can lock the doors and not let Bob leave Jacksonville. Or Bob can be gracious enough and answer just a few questions before we reopen the bar. So if we can have the lights come back on, perhaps, and we'll Bob, if you'll indulge us with a few questions. I think we have a group that's not shy. I see a hand. Whoever's got that hand back there, go ahead.
Everybody hear the question? The question was, in light of our current climatic changes, how do you build resilience into a city? And how do you make sure that you're able to accommodate Mother Nature? Well, I can tell you that had Irma hit Tampa, or had this storm that just missed us been a direct hit of a Cat 3 or above, the mayor's office would have been 15 feet underwater. Where I live, when I left to deploy to the Emergency Operations Center during Irma, where I lived for about 3 days, I didn't think my house on Davis Islands was going to be there when I got back. And so building resilience and resiliency into what you do moving forward is absolutely critical. Now, in some cases, you have existing structures which are difficult to retrofit, but in terms of the new projects coming forward on all that land that you own, I would incorporate the best practices that you can to accommodate for a rising sea level, a warming of the seas, storms that are far more dangerous and far more forceful than what we've experienced before. You have an opportunity to do that. Tampa, we did it in Water Street, but Tampa is largely built out, and so it was more difficult for us. But I think for Jacksonville moving forward, particularly with the newer projects, you've got a great opportunity to really build resiliency into the new construction. I'm going to tell you a funny story about, and the folks at lunch heard me tell this story. It was Irma, and I'd been living at the Emergency Operations Center for about 3 days. The first mistake I made was grabbing a sleeping bag out of the garage, which turned out to be my 12-year-old daughter's. It was pink, and it came up to about here. Needless to say, I didn't sleep much for those 3 days, but I'm standing there, and at the Emergency Operations Center, I had all the command staff with me, and we had these banks of TVs where we can watch all the weather channels and all the news stations, and I'm looking at Anderson Cooper on Bayshore Boulevard. And you remember when some of you saw the pictures of all the water getting sucked out off of Tampa Bay? I mean, the water along Bayshore Boulevard got pulled out literally a mile out, and so there was nothing but the mud flats there. And I'm standing there with the police chief, and I see these people out in the mud. And I'm thinking to myself, I read the Bible. That water's coming back. And I said to the chief, and you're going to have to excuse me. I said, Chief, go arrest those damn fools and get them out of there. And I looked behind Anderson Cooper, and there was my 17-year-old daughter. I said, Chief, go arrest all of them but her. Bring her to me. She was out there with her 17-year-old friends, you know. She was smart enough to put her hoodie on because she knows Daddy's going to be watching, and there she was out there. But resiliency, build it into your plans, pay for it. It's absolutely worth it because this is our new reality in terms of climate change.
Let's have one more question. Go ahead.
How big a role did public incentives play in the development of downtown Tampa? And at what point in that incentive process, you talked about the importance of world-class designs, at what point in the incentive process did the developers get locked in to you knowing what the final design was going to look like? Interesting question. Every city does it differently. I'm a big believer in being very prudent with the public dollars. I mean, I will fight for that last nickel in every negotiation because it's not my money, it's their money. And for us, we didn't really get into a bidding war with developers. Our investment was going to be in the public nature of these projects that I knew would attract developers who would come of their own volition. And they may try to come to the city and ask for subsidies. But for the most part, we didn't do subsidies the way other cities may do it. Now, the one, you know, and that's not to say it's right or wrong, it's just the way we operated. And they wanted to be in close proximity to the project that the public had invested in, which was the river. The one exception to that was in the Water Street project, we have a tax increment financing district in Tampa, where all of the increase in the valuation of the buildings, that revenue stays in that district. So it becomes self-perpetuating. And so with Jeff Vinnick, who was my partner basically for 8 years, he was going to invest what has now become almost a $4 billion project. And I knew that there was a role for the city and that tax increment financing in the providing of infrastructure, things that are of public good that everyone will benefit from, into that project. So I took $50 million of tax increment financing dollars. The county put in 50, so for a sum total of $100 million. And we basically paid for all the water and sewer lines, the sidewalks, all of the things that aren't sexy, that are underground, that everybody benefits from, not just that particular developer, which enabled him to go spend more money on what you saw there and that incredible design and the incredible project that it has become. Over the time, I didn't take an equity position. I don't, you know, if I was given subsidies, I would want an equity position in the deal so that whenever they flip the building, the city would be compensated for whatever the investment may or may not be. But I didn't have to do that. And so over time, Jeff's $4 billion project will throw off tens of millions of dollars over a 30-year period that will more than compensate the tax increment financing district and allow me to repopulate other projects. So, I mean, that may not work for Jacksonville, it worked for Tampa, but that's how we did it. Thank you, everybody.